Dust motes danced in the flickering light of monitors, the only witnesses to Elias Thorne's descent into madness. Elias was a ghost, a disgraced investigative journalist, living on the fringes of a society he no longer trusted. His downfall hadn't been caused by a lack of ethics, but by an abundance of obsession. 3 years ago, his sister had vanished during a restricted expedition. The official report cited a tragic accident, but Elias knew better. He had seen the redacted pages, the panicked radio logs, and the eyes of the bureaucrats who told him to stop asking questions. He didn't stop. Instead, he stripped his life down to a single purpose: finding the truth behind the places the world says we are not allowed to see. The breakthrough arrived as a silver encrypted drive left in his mailbox with no return address. When he finally bypassed the security, a single file appeared, titled The List of 10. It wasn't just a list of coordinates, it was a map of the world's most forbidden zones, locations systematically erased from modern satellite imagery and charts. Elias realized then that his sister hadn't just gotten lost. She had stumbled into a global conspiracy of silence, maintained by an entity known as the Foundation. The first entry was North Sentinel Island. To the public, it is a protected sanctuary for the world's last uncontacted tribe. But as Elias pored over the leaked data, a darker reality emerged. The arrows launched by the Sentinelese weren't just the defensive reflex of a secluded people. They were the first line of defense for something buried beneath the island's limestone core. The government's exclusion zone wasn't designed to protect the tribe, but to protect us from what the tribe is guarding. They are the silent executioners, voluntary wardens of a secret that predates modern civilization. Elias read a fragmentary report describing rhythmic vibrations emanating from the island that disrupted sonar for miles, suggesting the island was less a landmass and more a lid. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. The search then led Elias's focus to Brazil, to the nightmare known as Ilha da Queimada Grande, or Snake Island. Legend says there are 5 golden lancehead vipers for every square meter, making it the most lethal terrain on Earth. The official story is one of rapid evolution in isolation, but the drive contained a redacted biological report suggesting something far more sinister. The vipers weren't a product of natural selection alone. Their venom had been altered, and their aggression amplified. They were a living fence from a biological security system engineered to keep trespassers away from a decommissioned yet strangely active subterranean laboratory. Elias realized the forbidden label was often just a euphemism for guarded. His investigation took a psychological turn when he linked his sister's last known location to a specific document within the Vatican's secret archives. These are not just shelves of dusty papyrus, they are a fortress of forbidden knowledge. In a leaked file titled The Silent Shepherd, Elias found a reference to Archive Sector 4, Case 12, Shelf 89. This was the exact location his sister had mentioned before her disappearance. The weight of the discovery was suffocating. Why would an explorer in the Amazon be tracking an ancient shelf in Rome? The connection was a thread, pulled from a tapestry of secrets spanning the globe, and Elias felt the first stirrings of a fear that wasn't his own. But Elias wasn't the only one pulling threads. In the shadows, black sedans waited, and pings on his network told him he was being tracked. The Foundation, a shadow group dedicated to keeping these locations dark, was already closing in. Just as he prepared to flee, he opened a hidden image on the drive. It was a photograph of his sister taken recently. She stood before a fence at the next location, looking absolutely terrified and holding a terrifying warning sign. The flash of the camera in his hand was still burned into his retinas when the first SUV jumped the curb. He was in a crowded plaza in Brussels, surrounded by tourists, when the world suddenly fractured. Elias didn't wait for the doors to open. He dove into an alleyway, his boots skidding on cobblestones. The silver drive clutched against his chest. The men in tactical gear were ghosts, moving with a lethal precision that screamed of Foundation training. He narrowly escaped through a subway grate, the smell of grease and ozone filling his lungs as he plunged into cold darkness. He felt the vibration of a passing train, a reminder that while the world moved on in ignorance, he was now a hunted man. The Foundation was no longer just watching. They were reaching out to physically erase him. He surfaced later in a derelict safehouse, his hands shaking as he accessed the next files. Area 51 was the fourth location, a place so saturated in mythology that most people dismissed it. But the reality was far more chilling than tales of crashed saucers. The technological abyss hidden within the Nevada desert wasn't about extraterrestrials. It was about the horrific limits of human experimentation. Elias scrolled through the testimony of a researcher who had worked on the secrets of Project Mirror. It wasn't a telescope, but a machine designed to peer into alternate realities. The goal was an exit strategy for an elite class who knew the current timeline was failing. The project had gone wrong, creating localized temporal distortions. From the desert, his search pivoted to the Mount Weather Emergency Operations Center. To the public, it was a relocation site for officials in the event of nuclear war. However, Elias discovered a chilling betrayal. It was a selection center. The Foundation had already forecasted a great reset, and Mount Weather was where they decided who was genetically worthy of surviving it. It was a lifeboat for a self-appointed elite, a place where bureaucrats played God with the human genome. The betrayal felt like a weight, a realization that those sworn to protect the people were actually preparing for their extinction. He looked further north, toward the frozen silence of the Svalbard Global Seed Vault. It was meant to be a beacon of hope for a post-catastrophic world, but the logs revealed a slow, invisible sabotage. The heritage seeds were being replaced with sterile, genetically modified variants. If the world ended, the survivors would be beholden to those who held the keys to the only seeds that could grow. It was a monopoly on life itself, hidden deep beneath layers of permafrost. The cold dread was interrupted by a new notification. A hidden audio file had been uploaded to the drive. Elias's heart stopped when he heard the voice. It was his sister. She sounded broken, her breath coming in shallow gasps. She told him that she was inside the final location. She begged him to stop. "The 10 aren't just locations, Elias," she whispered. "They're bandages on a wound that won't stop bleeding. Please, don't find us." Despite her warning, he turned his attention to Poveglia Island. It was the site of mass plague burials. But the drive revealed that the ghosts were actually side effects of low-frequency sound testing. The Foundation was using the island's history as cover for infrasound weapons research, frequencies that induced hallucinations and intense dread. It was a vile psychological laboratory masquerading as a supernatural prison, a way to test crowd control. As the final file decrypted, a message appeared from the anonymous source. The source revealed themselves as a high-ranking double agent within the Foundation. They sent Elias a final set of coordinates, a string of numbers that should have pointed to the ocean, but instead led to a point deep within the Earth's crust. It was a gateway to the global core, a location that defied geography, and the source claimed it was the only place where the truth remained. The final coordinates didn't lead to a city or a known military base, but to the shifting volcanic soil of Surtsey Island off the coast of Iceland. Elias Thorne arrived as his small chartered vessel cut through the black waves. This wasn't a site for ecological observation. Deep beneath the hardened lava, he discovered the true horror of the forbidden birth. The Foundation wasn't protecting a pristine natural environment. They were engineering a successor. He saw vats of bioluminescent flora and synthetic organisms designed to flourish in an atmosphere the current human race could never survive. It was a replacement world, waiting for the old one to finally die. He didn't stay long. The trail of the 10th location pulled him toward the Pacific, to the forbidden shores of Niihau. Here, the isolation wasn't about preserving Hawaiian culture. It was a cruel experiment in genetic stagnation. Through the lens of his long-range camera, Elias saw the truth of the human zoo. The inhabitants were being kept in a pre-industrial state, their DNA meticulously shielded from the modern world's pollutants and mutations. They were a genetic backup drive, a library of what humanity once was, kept in a cage of paradise to ensure that if the species had to start over, the Foundation would have clean stock to work with. The final coordinates led him to a site that appeared on no map, a deep crust facility located at the tectonic seam where the world seemed to groan in constant agony. This was the Global Core Facility. The elevator descent was grueling, the heat rising until the air tasted of scorched metal. When the doors finally hissed open, the silence was absolute. The facility was a cathedral of glass and steel, suspended over a sea of magma. And there, standing before a wall of monitors that pulsed with the rhythmic heartbeat of the planet, was his sister. She looked older, her face etched with the weight of a secret too heavy for any one soul to carry. She simply pointed to the screens. The data was undeniable. The Earth's core was failing. The magnetic field was collapsing, and the rotational speed was fluctuating wildly. She explained that the 10 locations were the only safe anchors left, points on the globe where the magnetic stability was being artificially maintained by massive, hidden machines. These were the only places where life would survive the coming shift. Then, the shadows moved. The Foundation's leaders didn't come with guns this time. They came with an invitation. They offered Elias a seat at the table. They promised him safety, a place for him and his sister in the new world, provided he remained silent. If he told the truth, the ensuing global panic would tear society apart before the core even had the chance to finish the job. Elias looked at his sister, then at the silver drive in his hand. He thought of the billions of people living in the dark, oblivious to the fact that their world was a sinking ship with 10 lifeboats already reserved for the elite. He remembered the snakes, the ghosts of Povalia, and the sterile seeds in the ice. He realized that a life bought with such secrets wasn't a life worth living. With a steady hand, he connected the drive to the facility's main transmitter. The upload bar crawled across the screen. His sister's eyes met his, filled with a mixture of terror and relief. As the data hit the global satellites, bypassing every firewall the Foundation had built, Elias felt a strange sense of peace. The world would wake up to the terrible truth, and while the end might be inevitable, they would face it with their eyes open. The facility groaned as the earth below them shifted once more. The last thing Elias saw before the screen went black was the word completed. The truth was out, but as the lights failed, he wondered if the truth had set them free or simply sealed their fate.